Looking good.
Yeah, it's pretty perfect. All right. Wow, what do you say, guys?
That was great.
I'm ready for some beer. Howdy, howdy, howdy. This is Casey here, and I am super excited to share my next video with you. Thank you for watching. Today, we actually build the camper. We glue up the walls and the ceiling to the floor. So hang on tight. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe and share with others. And let's get into the details of how we do this. Well, first of all, we actually have to uninstall all the walls and the ceiling from the camper that we had installed the day before, which is very frustrating. But before we could even do that, we had to dry off the floor and the ceiling as much as we could, and the walls from the condensation of the dew that had fallen the night before. You can see the puddle of the water there on the pavement from all that dew that came off the ceiling. So we got a little wet in that process, and had to be a little careful, of course, with our stepping to make sure we didn't slip and fall while holding and picking up that big heavy ceiling panel and taking it off. But nonetheless, then we had to come back in, make sure everything's dry, and re-clean all of the extrusion and ceiling and wall panel sections that were going to be glued up. Take the adhesive sealant, which we had warmed up in the sunshine, and got it all ready and started to apply that sealant adhesive to all of the extrusions and the sections where the wall panels would come together with the floor, and applied tape, masking tape or painter's tape, to the edges just inside of where the sealant adhesive would end up, so we make sure we didn't have any push out of that sealant adhesive onto surfaces where we didn't want it. So that way later on we come back in and peel that tape off with that sealant adhesive still on there, and essentially clean that off and make a nice clean caulk line at the edges of all those extrusions with the walls and the ceiling. So there's a bit of work in order to do all that. You can see there's many hands working away together to not only get everything taped and prepped and of course get the sealant applied. We had one person that was applying the sealant adhesive, others that were supporting him, make sure we're bringing fresh tubes of that over to him, make sure the edges were clean and ready, and then when time was ready, make sure we're pushing those extrusions onto the floor or onto the wall sections, and getting ready to, of course, lift those heavy wall sections, which are much lighter than the floor by long stretch and lighter than the ceiling panel, but nonetheless still pretty heavy and awkward, being pretty big panels. These panels are 16 feet long in total length, shorter at the bottom at the floor, and they're also about 7 feet tall. So they are very large panels. So we have to then go through, really think through our process, plan it out, communicate it, get everything set up for the ceiling to come in. As I mentioned in my previous video, we really do need to make sure that we pull that ceiling panel up into position out of the way for the sidewall panels to come in, so that we can pull them in, drop those sidewall panels into the extrusions, and then lower the ceiling panel down onto it. So again, with all that planning and thought that goes into that, and make sure everything again is clean and glued up, getting that sealant applied. That front wall is now already sealed and into place and at a 90 degrees because we glued that up the day before. So now all we have to do is really bring these other panels all in together, get them all lined up and everything put into place and gets locked in. And so that's a pretty exciting moment when everything gets locked in. You can see the sidewall panel getting glued in here and the suction cups that we use to lift it, and then going through and really cleaning up the caulk lines, and after we get those cleaned up, pulling off the tape that was used there to make sure, again, we didn't have any push out of that sealant adhesive. So we do the same thing for the inside corners and walls and extrusions. You can see on this sidewall panel here, the blue tape down the middle, that's where the awning structural support is, and I'll go over more of why that's in a midpoint instead of at a high point. And here we, of course, lift the other sidewall panel in. It is pretty heavy and awkward again, and so ladders and many people and the suction cups really bring that all together, and we get that all glued into place. Again, the caulk and sealant and everything all cleaned up, the edges all cleaned off, and make sure we're being careful not to get any sealant adhesive on ourselves in order to not spread it onto anything else. We are using lots of disposable rubber gloves or latex gloves to spread that caulk and sealant adhesive around and make sure that we can then rip those latex gloves off of our hands with the sealant adhesive that's on them as we get it on there, and then apply fresh gloves onto ourselves as we bring the next panel up into place. So this way we don't go and spread that sealant adhesive around to other panels. So we keep it nice and clean. And if we do spread anything around at all, if we notice that, we quickly get on it with some rubbing alcohol to clean that up, and so we don't have any marks on these panels that would ultimately get left on. And here, lowering down the ceiling panel, you see it's already getting late in the day by the light, by where the sun is shining and the color of the light. It's already getting late in the day. We have to now pull the ceiling panel down on, get everything lined up and queued up, and it pulled down into place. And there's a fair amount of work that goes into that, so much so I climbed up onto the ceiling or onto the roof and pushed down on it to make sure everything is structurally strong. And then we noticed it was still just ever so slightly out of alignment, so we go ahead and pull the strap alongside to just pull things back into alignment. And then go through, before we lose our light and our warmth of the day, we go and make sure all the caulk lines are sealed up, cleaned up, spread out, and then remove any of that tape so we don't have any sealant that's stuck or adhered to that tape as it dries. This sealant adhesive does go ahead and skin up in about 15 to 30 minutes. So we have to move quickly here at the end of the day to get all this excess adhesive sealant off of the tape and cleaned up around the edges. But still, I am exuberant. This Expedition camper has been in the planning in my mind for about 2 years and on paper, and I'm going to go over that design with you in a future video and talk more about how I plan to build the rest of this out and use it. But I am super excited. As you can see, it's now taken shape and form as a camper, not just as a truck. And so I am so thrilled to have the HunterRMV team and Rob, my friend, helping me out with this build and getting it to this stage. Wait for future videos. And speaking of future videos, in this next video, we build the upper rear wall. And let me tell you, it took a whole day to build the two side walls, the front wall, and the ceiling together. But that rear wall took a whole nother day by itself. There's a lot of challenges coming up.